Daf Yomi, tractate of Avodah Zarah, page 47a, Mem Zayin Amid Aleph, and starting from the bottom of 46b, the bottom of 46b with the question. V'lav itmar Allah Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Avu Machloikes Kishinirud V'sod Ibru. The Gemara asks, but wasn't it stated with regard to this dispute that Rav Nachman says that Rav Abba Bar Avu says? The dispute is with regard to a case where it became prohibited to use the animals as offerings because a person engaged in bestiality with them, and later they became pregnant. I found this very odd and very bizarre. Aber seems that maybe this is a reality. Unfortunately, be a monster. But basically, if someone had relations with an animal, and somehow the animal became pregnant. Yeah, so you stay. Now we're on 47a. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's talking about if a person, right? Maybe he wasn't impregnated by the person. Maybe he's impregnated by something else, another animal. But it was already. I don't know what the actual technical details are. But anyway, if they became pregnant and later a person engaged in bestiality with them, all agree that the offspring are forbidden. Oh, I got you. It's not from the person. Although I have seen some freak cases where that happened, where it's usually would never happen, but once in a while it takes, and what a weird being that would be. But anyway, no, that's not the case. The case is they got pregnant from another animal, I think. If they became pregnant and later the person engaged in bestiality with them, all agree that the offspring are forbidden because the offspring were involved in the acts of bestiality, albeit in their fetal state. And here too, in the case of the wheat, is similar to the case where they became pregnant and later the person engaged in bestiality with them because the flour was also worshipped, albeit in the form of a stalk of wheat. Igadi Amri Machloikes Keshenirbu Ulvasoif Ibru Aval Ibru Ulvasoif Nirbu Dirakor Asu Ahalinamiki Ulvasoif Nirbu Damim. I just want you to make a statement for whoever's listening to this. I don't know, this is public, so I mean, someone could be listening to this and think that this is pretty bizarre stuff. And I'd like to just make a disclaimer that I am not the author of this. I am not, agreeing to necessarily or disagreeing, definitely not agreeing. But I'm reading the Talmud. This project is to read the Talmud. And that's it. This is just what the Talmud is saying. So, anyway, weiter. There are those who say that Mar Zutra himself quoted Rav Nachman's statement. The dispute is with regard to a case where it became prohibited to use the animals as offspring because a person engaged in bestiality with them and later they became pregnant. But if they became pregnant and later a person engaged in bestiality with them, all agree that the offspring are forbidden. And these stalks of wheat as well are similar to the case where they became pregnant and later a person engaged in bestiality with them. Hachi hashta hasamikara behema v'hashta behema teshau de'achida biyanpa achamika achide v'hashta kimecha. The Gemara asks, how can these cases be compared? They're in the case of offspring that it is prohibited to bring as an offering. It was initially an animal in its fetal state, and now it is still an animal. A fetus is treated as a full-fledged animal, and The opening of the womb is compared to a closed door that holds it in its place. Here, in the case of flour, it was initially wheat, and now it is flour. It is in a wholly new form. Therefore, no proof can be derived from the Mishnah. By Reish Lakish raises a dilemma. Hamishtach v'ladekel lulavo mahu mitzvah. In the case of one who bows to a palm tree, what is the halacha with regard to its lulav? Interesting tidbit of information that lulav, whether you do English gematria or Hebrew gematria, it's going to equal 68. Lulav, lamed lamed, vav bet is 68, and L is 12. L is 12 is 24 plus 21. 48 plus 21 is 60. Sorry, 24 plus 22. Yeah, it's 68 basically. It's 68. Either way, is it permitted to use a lulav that cut from the mitzvah or not? Ba'ilon shinato mitchila lakach lo tibayelach de'afilu leheded nami asu ki tibayelach v'ina shinato l'soif avado. The Gemara narrows down the dilemma with regard to a tree that one initially planted for such an idolatrous purpose. Do not raise the dilemma. In that case, the halacha is clear, as it is prohibited to use it even for an ordinary non-mitzvah purpose. Rather, raise the dilemma with regard to a tree that one planted and subsequently worshipped. Ve'aliba Daf Yosi bar Yehuda lo tibayelach de'afilu leheded nami asu ki tibayelach liba d'Rabbanan dinem mitzvah mai mi ma'is klapi gavra o lo. And do not raise the dilemma according to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, who holds that even for an ordinary purpose it is forbidden, see 45b. Rather, when should you raise the dilemma? Raise it according to the opinion of the rabbis, who hold that such a tree does not become forbidden. What is the halacha with regard to using a lulav from such a worship tree for a mitzvah? Is it nevertheless forbidden because it is considered repulsive to use such a lulav for the Most High, for mitzvah or not? Kiyas Ravdimi Amar Ba'asher Asher Labkim Abayile Yesh Dicho Yetzem Mitzvahs Or Ein Dicho Yetzem Mitzvahs. When Ravdimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he presented a different understanding of Reish Lakish's dilemma. He said, Reish Lakish raises the dilemma with regard to an Asherah whose status of an object of idol worship was revoked. His dilemma is as follows: is there disqualification with regard to mitzvot, or is there no disqualification? Disqualification with regard to mitzvot. This lulav was once unfit for the mitzvah, since it was worshipped while attached to the tree. Is it permanently disqualified? Meaning, can it never be rendered fit? Or is the halacha that there is no permanent disqualification with regard to mitzvot, and consequently, when the tree's status as an object of idol worship was revoked, the lulav became fit for the mitzvah. Tivshod le miditnan, kisau v'nitgala, patur milechasos, kisau haruach, chayv lechasos. V'yam Rav bar Chana, amar Rav Yochanan, lo shanu, ela shechazar v'nitgala, aval lo chazar v'nitgala, patur milechasos. The Gemara suggests resolve the dilemma from that which we learned in a mission in Chulin 37a. With regard to one who slaughtered an undomesticated animal or a bird and is obligated to cover the blood, and if he covered the blood and it was then uncovered, he is exempt from the obligation to to cover it a second time. But if the wind blew dust and covered the blood and no person was involved, he is obligated to cover it. And Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says the Mishnah taught that one is obligated to cover the blood after the wind covered it, only in a case where the blood was then exposed. But if it was not exposed, he is exempt from the obligation to cover it. And we discussed this issue and asked, when the blood was then exposed, what of it? Why is one obligated to cover it a second time? Once it was disqualified, it should remain disqualified. When the wind covered the blood, the person was exempted from covering the blood. If so, even if the blood is subsequently uncovered, he should remain exempt. Why then is he obligated to cover the blood in that case? And Rav Papa says, that is to say, that there is no disqualification with regard to mitzvot. Once the cause of the exemption from the obligation is removed, one is once again obligated to fulfill the mitzvah. If so, Rish Lakish's dilemma is resolved. Dear Rav Papa, Guvei Boyle, Mivshap Shitale, Rav Papa. The Gemara rejects the suggestion. It is with regard to Rav Papa's resolution itself that Reish Lakish raised the dilemma. Is it obvious to Rav Papa, based on the discussion with regard to the blood, that there is no disqualification with regard to mitzvot, and there is no difference whether that ruling leads to leniency, as in the case of the worship tree, whose status as an object of idol worship was revoked, thereby permitting its lulav branch to be used for a mitzvah, and there is no difference whether that ruling leads to stringency, as in the case of the blood, where one is obligated to cover it anew. Or perhaps he is uncertain. Therefore, when that ruling leads to stringency, we say that there is no disqualification with regard to mitzvot, and one must perform the mitzvah. But when that ruling leads to leniency, we do not say that there is no disqualification with regard to mitzvot. The Gemara concludes the question shall stand unresolved. Boy Rav Papa, mishtach v'lebehemet, tzamra ma'ol tcheles. Rav Papa raises a dilemma in the case of one who bows to an animal. What is the halacha with regard to its wool? May it be used for the sky blue wool? Tcheles demai, tcheles ekohanim, hainu ba'ed Rav Chama, v'tcheles tzitzis, hainu ba'ed Reish Lakish. Gemara asks, the sky blue wool in question is for which mitzvah? If it is for the sky blue wool for the ritual garments worn by the priests, then Rav Papa's dilemma is the same as the dilemma raised by Rabbi Chama earlier, 46b, with regard to the use in the temple of worship items that have since changed in form. And if the sky blue wool is in question is for the mitzvah of ritual fringes, tzitzit, this is the same as the dilemma raised by Reish Lakish with regard to the use of a branch of worship palm tree for the performing the mitzvah of lulav. Ein lachenami dilo havinu boyle vihai komi boyle mishum dika bile achlinata tzamra ma'u l'tcheles karna karneha ma'u l'chatzotzros shokea ma'u l'chalilin b'nimei ma'u l'pa'oros. More answer is yes. It is indeed so. Rav Papa did not need to raise this dilemma, as it was previously addressed, and the reason that he raises this dilemma is due to other matters that he needs to clarify concerning the use of parts of a worshipped animal in the Levite's ritual song, with regard to its wool. What is the halacha concerning using it for sky blue wool, used in the performance of mitzvah, with regard to its horns? What is the halacha concerning using for trumpets? Chatzotzrot. I wonder why they call it chatzotzrot. It should be shofar. Chatzotzrot was silver. Anyway, for trumpets, with regard to the bones of its thighs, what is the halacha concerning for its use of flutes? Maybe it was an animal, maybe it was covered with silver. I don't know. The flutes, with regard to its innards, what is the halacha concerning their use for harp strings? According to the opinion of the one who says that the primary element of the song in the temple is accompanied by musical instruments, do not raise the dilemma, as it is certain that the use of worshipped animals is prohibited, because the musical instruments are the items used to facilitate an offering. Kiti bailach. Vaitel. Oh, where were we? Yeah, Kiti bailach. Kiti bailach ali v'daman de'amar ikal shira peh v'sumo kala v'yalamahu umatinan odinma afiru hachi asir teg. When should you raise the dilemma? Raise it according to the opinion of the one who says that the primary element of a song in the temple is singing with the mouth, and that the musical instruments are used merely to sweeten that sound, meaning to accompany and enhance the singing. And accordingly, one can bring musical instruments made of a worshipped animal's parts. I don't see how this is different than the Esnan Zona making a bathroom for the Beis Hamikdash. If the price of the Zona, I don't think they ever answered that one though. That's maybe that's the same teku. And accordingly, one can bring musical instruments made of worshipped animals' parts, as they are not an essential element of the temple service, or perhaps it is nevertheless forbidden, since it is repulsive to use such instruments in the course of the temple service. The Gemara concludes, this question shall stand unresolved until the coming of Messiah and Elijah the prophet. Boy Rabo, Mishdach B'Lemayon, my Me'umaron Lechos Misochim, my Korum Boy Leilem Boy Lekomas Sagid, my dear Lemayaka Sagid, Boy Lekasafel. Rava raises a dilemma in the case of one who bows to a spring of water. What is the halacha with regard to using this water for libations? The Gemara asks, what is the dilemma he is raising? If we say that the dilemma concerns whether he is bowing to his own reflection, or perhaps he is bowing to the water. Why then is this a dilemma only with regard to libations in the temple? Let him raise the dilemma with regard to the use of a pail of water when water that a person bowed to, even for ordinary purposes. Oilam lemaya kasagid, yacha kami bayane lemaya dekame nisagid, dekame kame azadu dilma lidiburna demaya kasagid. The Gemara answer is actually, it is clear that he is bowing to the water. And this is the dilemma Rav raises. Is he bowing to the water before him? And therefore it follows that the first waters, meaning those that were present at the time of his bowing, are gone. And the water that is currently flowing is permitted. Or perhaps he is bowing to the flow of the water, which would render it prohibited to use all the water that flows in that spring for libations. Umi mitaseri. Rav Yochanan Mishum Bar Yotzaddak מים של רבי מניסורין, לא צריכה. The Gemara asks, and is the water actually rendered forbidden by its worship? Doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzedek, water that belongs to the public cannot become forbidden? The Gemara answers, no. The dilemma is not with regard to a public spring. Rather, it is necessary with regard to a spring that flows from the ground in one specific location that is privately owned. That concludes the Talmud portion for that, and we start a new Mishnah right now. The new Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Mi shahaya beito samuch la'avodah Zarah v'nafal asur le'v'nois keitzad yaseh koines b'toich shelo arba moisu b'ayni." In the case of one whose house was adjacent to a house of idol worship, and the dividing wall fell, it is prohibited to rebuild it. What should he do? He should withdraw into his own property 4 cubits and build the wall there. In Talmudic times, the external walls to homes were often built in 2 parts, with a functional space between them. If the space between the 2 parts of the wall belonged to him and the house of the idol worship, and then we're going to turn to 47b, and 47b I think we'll continue in the next Daf, take a brief break, and can pick it up with 47b.